Over the years, we've seen the rise of LinkedIn influencers. They've gained massive clout by sharing learnings, insights, and anecdotes from their experience. Brands have now started collaborating with influencers on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, a lot of these campaigns happen without disclosures. The Advertising Standard Council of India took note of this behavior and issued an advisory for influencers on LinkedIn. This is Hitesh Rajwani, and on this episode of The Quick Call, I get into a conversation with Manisha Kapoor, CEO and Secretary General at ASCI, to understand what this advisory entails for influencers on LinkedIn. Before I head to the conversation, Manisha, I have huge respect for ASCI as an industry body. I believe there are a lot of players in the ecosystem who talk about the good within the advertising ecosystem, but there are very few who keep the bad and the ugly in check. And I think that is where ASCI plays a very important role in all of our lives. And it makes life quite easier for advertising and marketing professionals. Though people on the other side of business might feel the other way, but in the longer picture, I feel in the larger picture, I feel ASCI has a very pivotal role to play within the Indian advertising and marketing ecosystem. So huge respect and thank you so much for doing this day in day out for the ecosystem.
Thank you, Hitesh. Having been on the other side for most of my career, it's also revealing to me when I joined in terms of the work that ASCII does, and like you said, to keep the ecosystem clean so that honest and good advertising has a level playing field. So yeah, I agree with you that it is an important job to be done.
So Manisha, like today's the conversation for the quick call, and just to give some context, the quick call actually captures whatever is happening in the ecosystem and like whatever is happening in the ecosystem in the current state. So whether there is a trend that is picking up in the like within the Indian advertising and marketing fraternity during that week, whether it's a very major update that has happened or a campaign that has went live, which is been talked about. We talk about every interesting development that is happening in a week, month, or in year. And this week, I believe this week and some bit of last week, a lot of conversation has happened around how LinkedIn influencers need to disclose material connections. And I feel ASCII has taken a giant step towards ensuring that there are certain guidelines that LinkedIn influencers also follow. So to catch me up with this particular update, I want to understand how did ASCII start with writing this advisory in the first place, and what were the sequence of events that led to this?
Sure. So I think just to step back, in terms of context, in 2021 is when we launched our guidelines for influencers on social media. And, that is when the guidelines first came out, and it needed any influencer to disclose that they had a material connection with, any product, service, or brand that they were talking about. And that is because on social media, sometimes it's very difficult to know what is organic versus what may be an endorsed opinion. And the reason why that needs to be done is that as consumers, we should have that information to decide how much weight or credibility we place on that influencer's opinion. Now, off late, LinkedIn is becoming more and more of a social media platform and a marketplace, right? It started, of course, with, and it continues to be a place for professionals to network, but we are seeing, brand endorsements or endorsements of certain products or services, or even an endorsement of other people's marketing strategies sometimes are
Right.
coming out. And I think we were seeing this anecdotally, and then I think we are just seeing more of it. And therefore, this is actually a reminder. These are not new guidelines, but this is a reminder that people who are influencers and you are writing about another brand or product or service, if there is any material connection that you have, and that may not just be payment,
Yeah.
it could be free products, it could be kind of relationship that you have with that organization, you are supposed to disclose it before you talk about that product or service. So there is no ban on talking about products or service or other brands. That's not the objective. The objective is just to be upfront and transparent about that connection. Uh, Again, so that people who are reading it, know how much they should trust or not trust. or what kind of weight or credibility they should assign to that post.
Right. ASCI came up with this advisory now for LinkedIn influencers. Did you see an uptick or a surge in number of LinkedIn sponsored posts which were not without a disclosure, or did you see any number of complaints that came, or like concerns that were raised to ASCI and then you took this step, or like what went about there?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we had been anecdotally, getting some of this, and a lot of people, the thing about LinkedIn is that everyone else on the platform is also an astute professional. So it's
Yeah.
perhaps easier for them to spot or suspect that certain posts are perhaps not all kosher in terms of, being, promoted posts without a disclosure. So we did start receiving a lot of tags around this. I think I wrote about this also a couple of months ago, and I think we've seen a kind of momentum, both in terms of, I think, LinkedIn becoming a platform to do this kind of thing, but also people calling it out.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of professionals started to call this out, started to tag ASCII. We wrote about it. We've received a lot of DMs, where people perhaps don't want to call out someone publicly because they may know the person, but we have been receiving several DMs with links to posts that are clearly promotional in nature. And a few professionals, in fact, I think also have taken this up as an agenda that they want to talk about, and therefore I think there was a certain momentum which was kind of shaping up, and therefore we felt it was the right time to remind people on LinkedIn that when they create content on behalf of a brand, or any other entity where they have a material connection, that it's that they must disclose it.
For our listeners, can you tell us what this advisory entails? Because I know you mentioned one advisory or regulation that had come for influencers in 2021, but is there anything special in this advisory? Uh, like, what does the advisory entail for LinkedIn influencers at large?
Yeah. So the advisory is essentially, like I said, it's a reminder of the guidelines and the fact that
Yeah.
these guidelines do apply to influencers who are on LinkedIn, because the advisory or the guidelines themselves are media agnostic. So it was just that I feel people on LinkedIn may not realize that they're also creating content on behalf of a brand, and it's not fair to consumers or readers to not disclose that they are they have a material connection with the organization they're talking about. And the thing with material connection is that it's something that the disclosure needs to be upfront, and it
Yeah.
needs to actually be before you engage with the post. So these disclosures ideally need to be the first thing that you do when you start writing, not embedded or buried in a bunch of other hashtags that you're using. So when you have disclosed it as a set of hashtags, etc., then they only partially meet the guideline in the sense that you have done the disclosure, but that disclosure is not upfront and prominent. The disclosure really needs to be made in a way that is hard to miss, and I think that's what the guideline calls for. And therefore, it's not right that I think people who, in a sense, one can assume, are perhaps more qualified or better educated, or belong to the corporate world where they would be able to understand the nuances of these things, perhaps more than an average influencer on social media. That they would also do this thing, and I think it needs to come from the industry that we ourselves respect these rules, and when we talk to our audiences, and it's not so even if you're a professional today, if you have a following and you are speaking about a brand, you are an influencer.
Overall, how ASCII is ensuring that influencers abide by these regulations and they stick to these guidelines? Apart from these regular reminders, are there any other measures ASCII takes to educate influencers on the need of such disclosures? Is there any other way that you enforce these like these guidelines on influencers?
So couple of things. I think one is we have a fairly active tracking system. So since these guidelines were launched in 2021, I think we've looked at over 6,000 cases, where influencers have been contacted, have been asked to modify their ads, And we have seen, I would say now almost about 80-85% that, influencers have done that. We regularly bring out reports where non-compliant influencers are listed. Uh, I think the other thing that is very important to remember for influencers on LinkedIn and on other media is that the government has pretty much the similar guidelines. So if you are in violation of the ASCI guidelines, it's very likely that you're actually in violation of a law. And I think
Right.
that is the seriousness which this advisory needs to be taken with, uh, because I think especially on LinkedIn, you do not want to risk your reputation as a professional in the industry by being in violation of the law, and that too on a public platform. So I think it's important for influencers, and particularly LinkedIn influencers, to pay very sharp attention to this, and not risk your professional credibility and reputation.
So one thing you mentioned that like if the influencers are in violation of ASCII guidelines, they are some way in violation of government like of certain laws as well. I want to understand, and maybe this is for the influencers who are listening to this also. What happens if they don't abide by ASCII guidelines? What is the extent of damage that could be done? I'm sure credibility is one of the things that gets affected if you're not disclosing. Apart from that, what happens if they don't abide by ASCII guidelines?
So essentially, ASCII being a voluntary compliance seeking body, if we do not get voluntary compliance, then we escalate these issues to the government. Now, under the
Okay.
government law, or under the Consumer Protection Act, influencers are endorsers, okay? And endorsers have a separate liability under the Act. So there could be fines, there could be suspension from endorsements. So there are a whole host of punitive remedies that are available under the law, that should the law decide that it wants to take up particular case, or do that, then these are all things that could be coming your way. So like I said, besides the loss of credibility, which in a sense is perhaps a loss that cannot be measured in
Right,
monetary
right.
terms, but there also could be monetary penalties that are imposed on you.
Yeah, and like you said, monetary penalties, suspensions, probably some holds on your communications as well. Probably if it is something really serious where you've endorsed something which is affecting the general public at large, then that also becomes I think it becomes a larger thing. It's more serious than what influencers take off currently.
Yeah, and in all of these things, unfortunately, sometimes you know people wait for that one big case to be announced, and then everyone kind of close the line, which I think is really not very mature thinking, again, on part of people who are you know a part of an organized sector, and are familiar with these sorts of things. And also, I think the other thing on LinkedIn is that you are not just potentially damaging your own reputation, but also that of your organization. So
Right.
today, as because I say, right, I'm the CMO of XYZ company, and if you are kind of caught violating the law, then it's not just you, but the company that you're representing on LinkedIn, in a sense, that also has a possible loss of reputation, or some credibility there.
Right. And for my understanding, I was reading, like when I was going through the comms for this particular advisory on LinkedIn influencers, there was something called as the responsible influencing playbook. So could you tell us more about that, what that is, and uh, like is that a mandatory thing for influencers or how?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, as ASCII, one of the things that we have started to work and quite hard on is that it's not enough for us to point out what the mistakes are, which we will do as part of our work. But how do we also empower people who wish to be honest, and people who want to be in compliance with the law? How do we help them understand the law better, understand their responsibilities better, understand how they can create posts which are creative but also compliant with the law? So we have an e-learning course that we launched about 6 months ago called the Responsible Influencer Playbook. It is now available both in English and in Hindi, and it's not mandatory for anyone to take it. But obviously, it if you are looking at brand endorsements and influencing as something that you would like to do, then how do you do that safely in a way that does not impact your reputation? and that's something that you can do for a sustainably long period of time, it would be quite useful for such individuals to enroll on the course. It's a short, less than 2 hour course that you can do at your own pace. It's interactive. It has quizzes and pop up quizzes. You can take an assessment at the end and actually get an ASCII certification. So I would highly recommend that people who are starting down this journey, whether you are a seasoned professional or a new influencer, uh, it if this is something that you are keen to explore, then I would highly recommend that you look at this course and you know understand the boundaries of what you can or can't do.
Interesting. And I think like in the longer run, since ASCII as a body is respected across brands, agencies, and within the ecosystem, this certification could also become like a, I'm not saying a mandate, but like probably your influencer marketing agencies could consider that certificate, that this particular influencer is coming from a certain background and has some understanding of their roles and responsibilities in the ecosystem. Shout out to everyone listening to this. If you are an influencer, probably you should take this responsible influencer playbook certification, and you would get a better sense of what you should know before endorsing or before taking up any sponsored campaigns. Manisha, one more thing, you said that a lot of people are like there are a lot of tags that happen to ASCII whenever there is some violation, and maybe you also get tags. Is there any other standard way for good Samaritans on LinkedIn or across all platforms to report any violation of ASCII guidelines?
Absolutely. If you go to our website, there is a tab which says register a complaint. And if you click that, it takes you through the journey of registering a complaint. We have an interactive chatbot that actually helps you lodge the complaint on the system, particularly if you're doing it for the first time. And it also kind of keeps you updated on the status of your complaint. So the fact that, a letter has gone from ASCII to the advertiser, or we've received a response from the advertiser, it has now gone to the jury, etc. So you do get those notifications, and of course, at the end, whatever was the decision or the recommendation of the Consumer Complaints Council is also shared with you. So it does help if you are, if you take the effort to lodge a formal complaint, then you do get all of these updates on your complaint as well. And, you know, I only want to say that, frankly, in today's day and age where digital advertising is everywhere, it's only a vigilant citizen force that can actually keep all of this in check. I think today advertisements are just so widely distributed and just so many in number that it is not possible for any one entity, be it the government, be it self regulatory body like ours, or be it even consumer organizations who are working in this space. It's not possible for any one body to take on this entire task. We need citizens, and we need the public who is aware, and particularly, again, coming back to people who are on LinkedIn. I mean, this is a cohort that is a very aware cohort. It's a very it's an educated, aware cohort. So I think if this cohort can take on their in a sense, it's a civic duty responsibly, and then we are definitely there to help. We of course have a big suo moto team ourselves, which is scanning the environment and picking this up. But like I said, those actions are selective for certain categories where we see high risk, etc. It's not something that is possible across the board. So consumer engagement in the system of keeping advertising ecosystem clean, I think, is really critical. And I'm also very happy that on LinkedIn we are starting to see that sort of garner
Yeah.
some momentum, and that really makes me happy.
So, I mean, again, out of curiosity, the tags that people do on ASCII, do they get noticed? I mean, like, say, if I tag ASCII on a certain post, like, given the volume of tags that you might be getting, do all the tags get noticed, or registering a complaint on the website is the best way to report something?
So registering a complaint is definitely a better way, because you are then updated on the status of the complaint as it kind of goes through. but we do look at 100% of the tags that where we are tagged, and we have a team that is monitoring that, and we pick that up, and where we think it's a complaint that is relevant and something that ASCII can look at, then we kind of take it into our system ourselves. But it's just that we can't keep the person who has tagged us updated on that specific complaint. But whereas if they were to lodge it on our system, then the system will automatically send them those kind of updates.
It's difficult to for someone to personally go and report, but if tags are being seen and are being heard, then I think that's a very, like, that's good to know that even a single tag on a certain post can actually trigger action or initiation from ASCII. uh, I'll quickly wrap up this call, Manisha, with a couple of questions and maybe some parting thoughts from you on this one. So the first thing I want to know, is there an ASCII guideline that every brand and agency out there swears by?
Yeah, I think we have several guidelines, and I think most of the violations we get are on misleading ads. But
Mhm.
I think that's also something that I would say advertisers are very conscious of. And of course, in creativity, you do want to push the boundaries. So that's a little bit of a tussle. But I would say, in general, uh, you know, advertisers do want their ads to be trustworthy. So I
Yeah,
think, in principle, there is, an understanding that we need to comply with the ASCII guidelines, and sometimes deliberately and sometimes unintentionally, they may cross that bar.
right. And is there an ASCII guideline which is flouted the most, and like you get most number of reports or complaints on that?
So again, misleading ads, I would say, are the number one area where we get a lot of complaints on. But some
Okay.
of our own work in the recent past, particularly, looking at ads of offshore betting and gambling companies, etc., has also made what we call consumer harm, also one of the other areas that we are seeing an increasing trend on. But I would attribute that to a lot of work that ASCII is doing in that area, suo moto. It's not necessarily that we're receiving consumer complaints on those issues.
Got it. And lastly, one lesser known ASCII measure, like which people don't know about and they could definitely tap on whenever they need to.
Yeah, so I'll talk about an interesting mechanism that we have, which is called suspended pending investigation. So in most cases, when we receive a tag or a complaint, we first write to the advertiser, seeking their justification for what they have done, whether they want to contest the claim or not, because it's only fair that they are also given a chance to put forth their point of view. But in exceptional circumstances where the ad, is so clearly in violation of the code, and where we feel that its presence in the public domain is extremely harmful. We do something called suspended pending investigation, where the advertiser is asked to suspend the ad, and then we investigate it. And then, of course, the final kind of outcome is given. So ads that maybe, so I don't know if you recollect, there was this deo spray ad a few
Yeah.
layer short, which was there,
Mhm.
and some other ads which either could be extremely obscene, or could during COVID, for example, we had a few ads that were just making such wild promises,
Mhm.
that so those are some of the ads. So I would call that our brahmastra. We don't use it very often. We use it really in exceptional cases, but that's something which gets very, very quick resolution.
Got it. Got it. And your parting thoughts for the listeners on the quick call today?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess since we are focusing on LinkedIn, which is a platform that many of us are as industry professionals, I think this is really our chance to make a difference and keep the ecosystem clean. And I would just again urge everyone who sees a violation of this nature, where you feel it's a promotional post, but there's no disclosure, just tag us and we'll do the rest.
Thank you, Manisha. Thanks a lot for sparing time for this quick call. I had a great time learning about this new advisory and as well as this lesser known measure. I think it's the need of the hour for the industry to have such regulations in place. Thank you so much once again for jumping on this call with me.
No, thanks, Hitesh. Absolutely a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you for jumping on this quick call with Hitesh. I'll see you in the next episode.